The new ID cards. Geronda. Someone said, we use the 5,000 drachma currency note which bears the number 666, don't we? It's just going to be the same with the new identification cards. The 5,000 drachma note is currency, and the English gold sovereign bears the image of Queen Victoria. This doesn't bother me. Render therefore unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. But this is about my identification card. It is something personal. It is not a mere currency note. Identification means what the word says. A person is identified personally by what that card states. The card contains the devil and I sign that I accept it. How can I do that? Geronda. What is the relationship between the ID card and the seal? The ID card is not a seal. It is the introduction to the seal. Geronda. People are asking what to do about the new ID cards. When people ask you, it is better to advise them to consult with their spiritual fathers and to be patient until we see how the church responds to this matter. Many are asking questions, but few understand the answers. Since I have written about this clearly in the pamphlet The Signs of the Times, let each act according to his conscience. A few people have said, of course, well, that is the opinion of one monk. It is not the church's position. But I did not express my own opinion. I simply stated the words of Christ of the gospel, because our opinion must be subject to the will of God as recorded in the gospel. Others who say the opposite of what I said claim that Father Paisios said it. Still others who hear such things, seeing that they are such very serious matters, do not bother to ask if that is what I really said, but just believe whatever they hear. I am not afraid to speak the truth openly. Some people come to my Kellevi and throw sixes in the box. That is nothing, after all. But once they threw a sign outside my door, I thought someone had come and not found me and had written a sign. He is out, so others would see it. Then I looked and saw the most abusive words, which I had not heard even as a layman. This whole present situation will be swept away, but first we will go through stormy times. People are roused and we, too, must rise up with much prayer. Some people are concerned over the matter of the ID cards, while others are exploiting the issue in order to create problems. The Church must take a correct position. She must speak out and explain to the faithful so that they will understand that, if they accept the new ID, it will amount to a spiritual fall. The Church must also ask the state to at least not make the new ID cards obligatory. If the Church takes a serious position and the state respects the freedom of choice of the faithful, then whoever wants can have a new ID card, and those who want to keep the old one can do so. In this case, the strong-willed who keep the old card will have to endure the abuse of the many who will oppose them. Most people will just go about their business. Those who wish to be served will have the new cards, and the other poor people, the devout, will have the old identification card and will have to endure hardships. Now that the minister has promised not to place the 666 on the new ID cards, visibly or invisibly, that too is something. We will be patient and things will clear up in time. It is something even to say that they will not put the 666 on the cards. They themselves deny it, but we will see what they do in the end. By the time the new ID cards come out, it is entirely possible that we may have the wrath of God upon us. After all, it is not likely that everyone will have to have a new ID card within 24 hours. Let's wait to see the first ones that come out. They will be examined, and if the minister reneges on his word, then the struggle will be a righteous one. If we continue to the demonstrations now, they will claim, look, they are shouting and creating trouble without reason. A dog, if it is a good guard dog, will bark when the thief comes. When the thief leaves, the dog stops barking. If it continues to bark, then it is not a good guard dog. Geronda. It was also said by the authorities that since we have religious tolerance in our country, the religion of each person should not be written on the new ID cards. Yes, this does not interest them, but it certainly interests me, because this is what identifies me. The card must state where I am from and what I am. If religion is not included in the card, there will be problems. For example, someone will go to the town hall for a marriage license. If his ID card says Orthodox, regardless of how good a Christian he really is, then it will be alright. But if it does not state the religion, how can they give out a marriage license? For the church, this will become a complicated issue. Now, if religion is stated on an optional basis, this would also be a sort of confession. Europe is Europe. Here, things are different.